Did you know that in one European country, the state changed the tax rules more than 300 times in a single year? Or that in another, you could actually lose your home, not because of debt, but because of a missing piece of paperwork? These are not exaggerations, they're the daily reality in certain corners of our continent. In this video, we're taking you on a shocking journey through the top 10 European countries where the system isn't just inefficient, it actively crushes the dreams of citizens and businesses alike. Relying on official data and local media reports, we'll expose the legal traps, tax paradoxes, and endless bureaucratic weights that are slowly eroding Europe from within. And we invite you to share your own experiences in the comments, along with other countries you believe deserve a spot on this list. Welcome to a new video from Amazing Europe. Number 10. Ukraine. In Ukraine, citizens are fighting two wars today, one against an external invasion and another against the ghosts of a bureaucratic past that refuses to die. Before 2022, doing business meant navigating a system where bribes were the essential grease for every gear. Then the invasion struck like an earthquake, forcing the country into a brutal choice: reform or collapse. This shock triggered an incredible acceleration toward digitalization, with services like the Dia app cutting out physical intermediaries and the opportunity for under-the-table payments. And yet, the phantoms of the old regime still haunt the system. For businesses, this means public contracts that, despite oversight, can still be rigged. It means permits that mysteriously stall, awaiting an incentive. And above all, it means that when injustice strikes, the courts might not be a fair referee, but a dangerous new variable. For the average citizen, the nightmare is even worse. Those who lost their homes are thrown into a bureaucratic labyrinth described as difficult and prolonged, even by lawyers themselves, struggling with impossible deadlines and missing documents. It's a Kafkaesque algorithm, requiring reports, commission inspections, and the challenge of navigating the complex digital process through the Eroding portal, where every mistake can be fatal. Even the government admits it's one of the most complex systems ever created. But the most toxic poison is the distrust it creates. The fear that behind every committee deciding on compensation, there might be a layer of corruption. Ukraine is building its future on new foundations, but it is forced to do so on a terrain still haunted by the ghosts of the old regime. Number 9. Romania. Move over to Romania and you'll meet an enemy not made of flesh, but of cardboard, the file folder with metal rails. It's not just an object, it's the symbol of a bureaucracy that worships paper in a digital world. But the fetish for paper is just the beginning. The real poison is instability. Get this, in just 18 months, the fiscal code, the very Bible of tax laws, was amended 343 times. It's like playing a game where your opponent rewrites the rules after every move. How can a business plan, invest, or survive in such chaos? And if you make a mistake in this mess, you'll run into ANAF, the tax agency. Imagine this: you're audited, they dispute some minor issue, and they freeze your accounts. You file an official appeal, complete with evidence and explanations. Well, studies show that in 62% of cases, the agency itself rejects the appeal, siding with its own inspectors. The only way out is court, a years-long ordeal. And this nightmare isn't just for companies. It's common for a family doctor to issue a referral for a specialist that expires before you can even get an appointment, forcing you to start the whole loop again in frustration. Need to renew your ID or passport? Expect endless lines, often forming as early as 3 a.m. Want to build a house? Better be patient, because the average wait time for a building permit can easily exceed 6 months. These aren't numbers we invented. These are the lived experiences of countless Romanians. Number 8. Portugal. Do you know what the paradox of doing business in Portugal is? It's a place where you can win a lawsuit and still lose your company. That's not an exaggeration. Picture this: a client doesn't pay you, you take them to court, and the judge rules in your favour. Great! Except that getting that ruling takes an average of 24 months. In those 2 years, your cash flow is strangled. You struggle to pay salaries and suppliers. Banks shut their doors on you, and you rack up debt just to stay afloat. By the time justice is served, the money you recover only plugs the holes. It doesn't revive a business that's already dead. You won on paper, but lost in reality. This isn't mere speculation. Such instances have already been recorded. This culture of exhausting delays isn't limited to the courts. A company spends, on average, 272 hours per year just to fulfill tax obligations, compared to only 55 hours in Luxembourg. But the biggest challenge is healthcare. By the end of 2024, around 75,000 people were waiting for surgery beyond the legal maximum wait times. That means nearly 30% of patients on the list are waiting longer than they should with their health on hold. Want to buy a house? An odyssey that, between the bank and the paperwork, can take up to 6 months. Portugal lures you in with the promise of a peaceful life, but its bureaucracy can be draining. After all, if the state itself takes an average of 24 days to pay its own suppliers, what hope does a regular citizen have of getting anything done quickly? Number 7. Croatia. Want to buy a slice of paradise on the Croatian coast? Well, you might find out that, along with the land, you've also just purchased the 10 grandchildren of the original owner, who died in 1950 but still show up as co-owners. This isn't an exaggeration, but the original sin of Croatian bureaucracy, the land registries. They are a legal labyrinth frozen in time, so outdated and tangled that you never really know who owns what. As a result, every real estate deal isn't just a purchase, it's a high-risk legal gamble. What does this mean for an average citizen? That inheriting a house can turn into a curse. Succession processes can drag on for years, sometimes decades, trapping families in legal limbo where they can't sell, build, or use property that's theirs only on paper. And for those wanting to start a business or simply build something, the wait for a construction permit can last up to 4 years, twice the time allowed by EU regulations, often because it's impossible to determine who legally owns the land. This chaos has created a unique monster, the plague of illegal construction. For years, faced with the impossibility of getting permits, people just built illegally, so much so that the government had to launch massive and complex retroactive legalization campaigns. In Croatia, the battle isn't just against slow bureaucrats, it's against a legal uncertainty that freezes development and wears down everyone, from small heirs to large investors. Number 6. Spain. Welcome to Spain, a country that on paper is 1, but in reality, it's 17. Its bureaucratic nightmare becomes clear when you look at the life of freelancers. Until the end of 2022, the rule was brutal. From day one, even with zero earnings, you had to pay a fixed monthly fee of almost €300. A legalized entrepreneurial suicide. Since January 2023, the system has been tied to income, but the trap hasn't disappeared. New freelancers for the first year still pay €80 per month, even if they make no revenue at all, a fixed cost just to have the right to try working. But the real madness is that Spain doesn't have one bureaucracy. It has 17, one for each autonomous community. Your rights change based on your postal code. Need surgery? The average wait is 51 days in Madrid, but it jumps to 139 in Andalusia. Want to inherit your family's home? In Madrid, inheritance tax is nearly zero, but in Asturias, it could cost you a fortune. This fragmentation turns starting a business into an odyssey. While national procedures take an average of 12 days, getting local licenses can drag on for months. In Spain, uncertainty isn't the exception. It's the rule of a system that forces you to navigate 17 stormy seas at once. Number 5. Belgium. Have you ever tried requesting a document in a country with 3 official languages and 6 different governments? Welcome to Belgium, the world's masterpiece of institutional chaos. Its bureaucracy isn't just a maze of offices, it's a political and linguistic puzzle that will drive you mad. Let's take a real example. Imagine you want to open a small restaurant in Brussels. You can't just knock on the door of the state. To get your VAT number, you'll deal with the federal government. But for the permit to renovate the space, you must go to the Brussels capital region. Want to sell alcohol? That falls under the local municipality, which has its own rules. And to hire a waiter, here comes the real madness. You'll pay social contributions to the federal level, but to apply for hiring subsidies, you must contact the regional agencies, which in Brussels are split by language, one francophone and one Flemish. So for just one small restaurant, you're forced to deal with at least 4 different administrations, each with its own paperwork and deadlines. But the real death blow comes when we talk about employment. Even if you manage to navigate this institutional nightmare and hire someone, you'll be crushed by the highest labour tax wedge in Europe. The OECD confirms that Belgium has the highest tax burden on labour, over 52%. That means for every euro an employer spends on an employee, more than half goes to taxes and social contributions. Belgian bureaucracy is a near-perfect system, not designed to serve, but to sustain itself through its own unstoppable complexity. Number 4. Poland. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the government has rewritten the tax rules in such a chaotic way that not even accountants or the government offices themselves know how to apply them. This isn't a hypothetical. It's the reality of the Polski Ład, the new Polish order. More than a reform, it was a legislative bomb that plunged thousands of businesses into panic, with rules that changed week by week. But that chaos is just the tip of the iceberg in a system that seems designed to exhaust anyone who produces value. For a Polish entrepreneur, the daily nightmare has another name: ZUS, the Social Security Institute. An entity that demands contributions often disproportionate to actual earnings, and whose audits are feared like a plague. And when laws are this confusing, what does a business owner do to protect themselves? They request an individual tax interpretation. In other words, you pay the state to please explain how to apply its own incomprehensible laws. They give you an official written answer. Sounds like a guarantee, right? Wrong. There are countless cases where, years later, a different official decides that the same interpretation was wrong, triggering devastating audits and retroactive fines. In Poland, sometimes the fight isn't against complex taxes, but against a state that doesn't even guarantee the validity of its own answers. Number 3. Italy. In Italy, imagine having an employee who doesn't work for you for nearly 190 days a year because they're working for the state. That's the bureaucratic burden on a small or medium-sized business. And considering that these businesses represent 96% of all Italian companies, you can see how doing business here is anything but easy. Bureaucracy is described by Italians themselves as a virus, a schizophrenic system where, if a client doesn't pay you, you might wait up to 8 years for a final civil court ruling. And in that time, many businesses don't survive. They collapse. This suffocation seeps into everything, even schools. 47% of primary school teachers say that administrative paperwork is their main source of stress. A theft of time and energy that should be dedicated to teaching, not filling out endless forms. This system comes with a staggering cost, 14.5 billion euros a year. That's not just an abstract number. It's the cost of running the municipal bureaucratic machine alone, a burden that falls directly on the citizens. And this is exactly why bureaucracy fuels Italy's brain drain. Of course, young graduates aren't fleeing from long lines at public offices, but from the consequences. They flee an economy paralysed by bureaucracy, unable to generate growth, opportunity, or decent wages. Since 2008, more than 700,000 Italians have left, 200,000 of them with university degrees. Italy invests in training them, and then its own bureaucratic swamp forces them to gift their talent to other countries. Number 2. France. In France, the most feared book isn't a horror novel, it's the Labour Code. With over 3,500 pages of rules, exceptions and subclauses, this sacred monster of legislation is the perfect symbol of a bureaucracy that chokes initiative. So it's no surprise that, according to a survey, 70% of French business owners say they are literally afraid to hire. They know that entering that maze means facing enormous costs and high legal risks, even for minor infractions. But this nightmare doesn't just haunt businesses, it's everywhere in the daily life of ordinary citizens, under 2 names. The first is Yourself, the agency that collects social security contributions. People describe it as a true administrative hell for freelancers who often battle errors, unjust demands, or incomprehensible notices. The second is CERFA, the name given to France's official government forms. There are nearly 1,800 different types, for everything from applying for social aid to selling your car. And here's the absurd part. According to the National Assembly, in 80% of cases, the administration is asking you for information it already has. In France, bureaucracy is not a service. It's an exhausting ritual, a labyrinth designed to constantly remind you who's in charge. Before we reveal number one and take a quick look at the transcontinental countries, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to turn on all notifications, so you won't miss any of our videos about Europe. And don't forget our new channel, America vs. Europe, where we rank US states, Canadian provinces, and European countries by all kinds of factors. Also, tell us in the comments about your personal experiences and which other countries you think deserve a spot in this top 10. Number 1. Greece. According to the Global Business Complexity Index 2025, Greece isn't just the worst place for business bureaucracy in Europe. It ranks worst in the entire world among the 79 countries analysed. And the nightmare doesn't only affect businesses. In what other European country could you risk losing your family home? Not because of debt, but because you couldn't prove fast enough that it's truly yours? Welcome to Greece, where the attempt to build a modern land registry has turned into a national nightmare. Thousands of citizens were given a strict deadline to declare properties often inherited through generations. The result? Complex procedures and unrealistic deadlines have put countless homes and plots of land at risk. If you fail to register them in time, they fall into a legal limbo. Then, eventually, they become state property. And this paralysis doesn't just hit landowners. Ask any retiree waiting for their pension from EFKA, the National Fund. The average wait time for a first payment can exceed 2 years, leaving people with no income after a lifetime of contributions. This same system is the one that for years slowed down even the Ellinikon project, an €8 billion investment meant to symbolise Greece's economic revival, stuck in a web of permits and red tape. And sadly, we can't ignore the still widespread fakeliki, the little envelope, the bribe, often seen as the only way to get things moving in a broken system. On the left, you can see the full ranking we've just covered. On the right, the situation of the transcontinental countries. Russia would land around 12th place, right next to Ukraine. Kazakhstan and Turkey, however, would make it into the top 10. And speaking of corruption, this video shows which European countries are perceived as the most corrupt according to their own citizens. That's all for today. See you next time.